Hello, Penguins fans. Happy Tuesday, July 19th. We are just flying through this offseason. Before you know it, training camp is going to be here in 2 months. Just think about that. We're about 7 to 8 weeks away from Penguins training camp being right back here, but, still, I guess a little ways to go until then. The dog days of August are upon us when, there's just probably not going to be a lot of NHL news, to say the least. But for today's show, I'm going to get into Ryan Poehling because I don't really think I talked about him that much when discussing the big trade that got Jeff Petrie here. But, Ryan Poehling was also thrown into that, very young player, former first-round pick, someone that, might be a late bloomer. His underlings aren't that good, but, has the potential to turn around here. I'll go into his numbers, where I see him fitting on the team, at least right now. We're also going to get into what I saw from Josh Yohe today, just talk about Ron Hextall's tenure as a whole. I'm going to give my full grade on this offseason so far and, just talk about, I think just everything combined and what is to come, and maybe also talk about what happened last offseason. And then for the final segment, we're going to get into a little bit of some silly season stuff with Matthew Tkachuk, because I'm sure that's going to come to a head very, very soon. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You want to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. More record-setting numbers for this podcast lately. We are in the dog days of the offseason, or just about coming up. This podcast is number 11 in the country on Apple when you go to chartable.com and search up hockey podcasts. I cannot thank all of you enough for listening to the show, whether it's one episode, 5 episodes, 10 episodes, 100, maybe more than that. If you can stand listening to me and my bad takes about the Penguins, I'm just messing around with that last part potentially. But it's crazy that, the podcast is basically top 10 among listenership in this country for all hockey podcasts when there's not a lot of hockey being played right now. 2 of the most recent episodes are, 2 of the most listened to episodes in the podcast history. That just goes to show that, this fan base is probably – no, that's not probably. This fan base is, I think, the best one in all of hockey. So thank you all so much for listening. If you do love the show, you can comment on the YouTube page, give a review on Apple. If you don't like the show, just maybe keep that comment, I guess, to yourself, or I guess just don't listen. But I don't know why people would hate listen to podcasts. That's just weird behavior. Let's get into our first discussion for today, and that's Ryan Poehling. So, I don't think a lot of people, knew who he was when he came over in this trade. I mean, me personally, I didn't really know much about him. The underlying metrics, they're not great. Fourth liner, this is per Jay Fresh's stuff, 23 years old, but is only making $800K for the next year, 11th percentile in wins above replacement, only the 34th percentile for 5-on-5 offense. That means 2/3 of his peers are better than him at that. 17th percentile for finishing, 7th percentile for power play, even strike defense. 84% of the players are better than him with that. Goals per 60 below 30%, primary assists per 60 below 35%. He's able to draw some penalties, but just a lot of red in there. It's just, this is a player that, really has not panned out, ever since he was taken 25th overall in the 2017 NHL draft. He's really only played, he only actually played 85 games in 3 seasons, 2018-19, played 1 game, had a hat trick in his first NHL game, which is pretty crazy. Didn't really play after that. 2019-20, 27 games, only 2 points. And then this past year, played about 60 of the games, 9 goals, 17 points. So, I guess that's not terrible for a fourth liner, but, you still expect, I think, a little bit better. And I know he was on a pretty crappy team, but, the fact that he did almost score 10 goals on a bad team, I think that could potentially be, to the Penguins' advantage, because I think he'll hopefully be playing with better players in the bottom six, like a Teddy Bluger or Brock McGinn or something like that. I do think he is in their plans to start the season. I don't think, he should be, I know the bottom six is not good right now, but he 100% should be over the likes of like Drake Caggiula, Josh Archibald, a couple of these other guys from Wilkes-Barre. And it's a no-brainer, in my opinion. He only has 1 year left on his contract again at $800K. You really got to see what he has for this year. I believe he's an RFA after this. So the Penguins, they should have his rights after this. But, the good part about this kid is that he's only 23. He still has a lot of room to grow as a player. Again, only 85 games of NHL experience. So some kids, they're sometimes late bloomers, and sometimes, they do need, that change of scenery. Good Lord, what the heck was that? Sometimes they do need that, just to be a better player, for their career. I'm going to his page on Natural Stat Trick right now. So 586 minutes at 5v5 this past season. When he was on the ice, the Canadians only had 45% of the shot attempts, 34% of the actual goals for. I think part of that I think is due to his play, but I also think part of that is due to Montreal being putrid defensively. They had some of the worst defensive metrics in the league. 45% of the expected goal share, 45% of the scoring chances share, only 6 high danger goals for the Canadians when he was on the ice. 19 high danger goals against. That was a massive yike. So yes, the underlyings are bad. The counting stats, not the best either, as Louis Domingue said after. I shouldn't say after, yeah, it was after that game, 1 triple overtime winner. But after that, I'm not really going to pay too much attention to him now that he's in New York. But again, I really do think that Mike Sullivan and his coaching staff can do some work with this player. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to, score 15 to 20 next year or something like that. But, I think he can maybe get 10 to 12 if he does play a full season. I think his underlines could improve by playing with better line mates such as Teddy Bluger, who's, a much, more defensive minded center than someone who he was playing with in Montreal. He's definitely a player I'm really intrigued about going into this season. I doubt he'll start the season in Wilkes-Barre. I think at, the worst case for him speaking, he's the 13th forward. But again, at least for right now, I do think he is going to be on this team for, the opening night roster. And I would expect him to stay on this team throughout the season. I don't think they would have asked for him in the trade if they probably didn't see him being in the lineup the entire season. Again, I know the metrics stink. I know his counting stats aren't that good. Even, a stat that I hate to reference, plus minus, I think it is one of the most useless stats out there to use an evaluated player. I will say though, minus 21 is pretty freaking terrible. That's not good. Again, I hate using it. I almost never use it when evaluating a player. There's so many other stats to use, but that one's bad enough where I think it deserves an honorable mention there. But we've seen players come from struggling situations and play some of their best hockey. Or even Mike Matheson, and yeah, sure, he was a better player at that time when he was in Florida than Ryan Poehling, but Poehling is also younger than Matheson. He can really skate, decent bottom six score at least this year. And, if he adds some tools to his game and he's able to improve defensively, I think he could potentially be, a decent bottom six player for at least this year and potentially next year in the year after that. He's 23. I think he's worth the chance to take a little bit of a risk on. And honestly, there really is not that much of a risk because he's only making $800K. If it doesn't work out, you just not qualify him since I believe he's an RFA, and then he can just walk to free agency. And then, I am actually just going to make sure here that I am not screwing up here. I'm going to go to Cap Friendly real quick. I want to make sure that I'm not making an educated guess here. He will be an RFA. And again, he's not making much money at all. So the Penguins will have his rights if they qualify him. But again, even if he doesn't play well, you don't have to qualify him. You can just walk to free agency. You can replace him in free agency, just any other fourth line, third line depth player. Those are the easiest spots, at least on the fourth line. Those are pretty easy spots to fill, when you scour the open market and looking for players who, A, can play and, B, can score. I mean, you can get some of those guys for cheap. I mean, Van Heinen, signed for pennies last year, puts up 18 goals for you. So, those kind of players, they're all out there, and they're waiting to get a shot. But, I do think Poehling is, worth it to see what he has for this trade. I'm excited to see what he can do in a new system with a fresh change of scenery. Got it right there. Coming up here in this next segment, we're going to get into just overall Ron Hextall's offseason, the grade I would give him right now, go into all the moves, just everything that he has done from the moment the Penguins got eliminated in 7 games by the New York Rangers, and of course, what is to lightly come. Now, before I get to that, from the people who invented Healthy and Tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given Coconut Brownie Chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love, and a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you. They're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and they are all delicious. You can go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Remember, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your order at built.com. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So, I was inspired by this topic today because Josh Yohe of The Athletic wrote just a great article, detailing Hextall's tenure as a whole. He's been on the job for basically a year and a half now. It's pretty crazy how this has just flown by hanging at this point. But, offseason, got started off with, the Brian Rust contract, 6 years, $5 million per, kept the AAV down, a little bit of term, sure, whatever. It's not going to really matter. So it's a good check mark. Maybe a bit weird that he was prioritized first, whatever. Okay. So then you get the Casey DeSmith contract. Okay. I wasn't too big of a fan of it at the time because I'm still, I guess, a little uncomfortable riding the same goalie tandem back 3 years in a row. But, you look at some of the other options out there that signed, even everyone wanted Fleury to come back, but he got $3.5 million for 2 years in Minnesota. Penguins were not going to pay that. You saw some of these other goalies. I think Jaro Halak got like a similar deal to DeSmith, and then Braden Holtby, it sounds like, was retiring according to Frank Saravalli. So when you really think about it, 1.8 is really not that bad. DeSmith, Jara's making 3.5, so you're spending a little over $5 million on your goalies. I think that's the best case scenario. You don't usually want a lot of money tied up to your goaltending unless you absolutely have to. That's like Andrei Vasilevsky, prime Carey Price back in the day, prime Henrik Lundqvist. Back in the day, you don't want to be paying your goalies top dollar if you don't have to. So obviously up next was the Chris Letang deal, 6 times 6. People had a problem with the term. Again, I really don't care about it. The team was going to be bad at that point. You got him for a freaking discount. Everyone was saying, including myself, I will take that on that too. I was like, this is probably going to be like a, 4 times 8, 5 times 8, something like that. Nope, 6 times 6. That comes out of nowhere. Well, I will say this, I'll give credit to Rob Rossi on that. He was the first one to actually say that he was hearing that it was going to be 6 years. So he was right on that one. That's for sure. So that was able to keep that AAV down. And then obviously the Evgeni Malkin situation happens. 4 times 6.1. The fact that Hextall got both Letang and Malkin signed for $12.2 million is unbelievable. That is a massive W, as the kids like to say. The only contract that I'm still a little bit hesitant on was it is still Rickard Rakell. 6 times 5, 60 again. The term, we can argue about that until the sun comes up every day. The $5 million. I know that's probably close to the going rate for a reliable top 6 winger, but I want to see if Rakell can do that for a full season. I'm worried about it because we only had such a small sample size for it. And I talked about that on one of my episodes week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. If you play him with Sid, I said this before, I think, he could definitely score 20 to 25. And, that's going to be the big question. Are you going to get a player who scores 15 to 18 a year for a full season? Or are you going to get a player who scores 20 to 25, potentially even 30 for a full year, who really makes that, contract worth it? And I have nothing against him as a person or a player. I think he's very good. He's great with the puck on his stick. He's able to freeze defenders very beautifully, has a wicked release, is able to knife through guys like it's nothing. The play that I think about all the time. It was the 1-on-3 basically against the Sabres late in the season, and he took them all on and almost had the goal of the year for the Penguins. So, his skill, it's never, not been there. He's always been skillful. It's just a matter of, can he produce for a full season? So, the jury, I think, is still a little bit out on that one. But, I think overall, he got all four of those players, Rust, Raquel, Malkin, and Letang to what? 22 million basically. And that's, three of those players are going to be playing in your top six. So 17 million of those players in the top six. You add that up with Sidney Crosby, that's about 26 million. That's some nice salary cap work there. And then he made the two trades this past weekend, getting Jeff Petrie for Mike Matheson, and then, dumping John Marino's contract for Ty Smith. I really like the moves that he made to upgrade the defense. It was clear that he did not like the defensive group after the playoffs. He probably did not like that they were pushed around, gave up leads in multiple games, and he wanted to make sure that that's not going to happen again. So I was a fan of those moves. I'm slowly starting to eat my words a little bit with this general manager. But as Josh wrote today, we all know what the biggest question is. It's the bottom six. Who is going to be scoring the goals? If the season were to start today, and still 3 months away, so I don't even know why I'm saying this, but I'm going to put it out there. If the season were to start today, who is going to score the goals down there? Maybe outside of Jeff Carter. I know he had 18 last year, but is he going to do that again? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical, at least myself. Teddy Bluger, he's fine defensively, but from what I just don't get the sense that the staff is really that enamored with him, to be honest. Brock McGinn, he struggled the second half of the season down the stretch. He started out the season nicely, but 3 more years at $2.75 million. Not looking good, to say the least. Drew O'Connor, he's a massive unknown. 20 games of a sample size basically, played fine, and I would probably say that he's the Penguins' best bet for the players to come up from. I guess in terms of how do I say this? I think he's the best chance of any of the Wilkes-Barre guys to come up and make a difference next year. But how much can you really rely on him to score double digits over an 82 game season? It's just he's just so much of an unknown. Same with Radim Zohorna. He's in his mid 20s at this point. He's basically outside of his peak years. How much can we rely on that? Valtteri Pusin, I hear this all the time too. Oh yeah, he's ready. The guy played 1 game last year, and sure, he made a good leap to the AHL. His production down there was actually pretty good, but this leap is going to be 5 times that. So I'm just, I'm not sure. Then obviously, Ryan Poehling, how is he going to be with a change of scenery? Then you have Drake Caggiula, Josh Archibald, Kasperi Kapanen down there, because it looks like he's going to be back, even though I don't think he should be back on this team. I think he should be used as trade bait. It's a bottom six that, it reminds me a lot of the late Shiro days, when I'm sure you all were, don't plug your ears when I say these players, but I'm sure you all remember the days when players like Zach Sill were filling the bottom six, and the corpse of Craig Adams and Joe Vitale and, Brian Gibbons and Bobby Farm. The weird people had the weirdest fetish with Bobby Farm. I have no idea what that was about. I guess it's just because he hit people all the time, but all those Garrett Wilson of all people, just Lee Steffi, at least he could play a little bit, but those bottom sixes were horrendous. Brandon Sutter, of course. It's kind of looking like that right now. So I think a lot of this offseason, the rest of this, that's going to be judged by how he does with that. I think right now I'm giving him a solid B. I'm mostly pretty happy with the moves he's made. Has he had his blunders overall for his career? Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Jared McCann thing, I'm still kicking my, feet over. I mean, he should still be a Penguin, at least in my opinion. The Brandon Tanev thing, sure, it was nice that he got out of that contract, but I feel more comfortable with them on this team right now than someone, I guess, like, Brock or, I don't know, Kapanen or something. But that was a Rutherford move. Ron really didn't really have anything to do with that. But, he's got to make a move or two down there. But again, I think a solid B for that. And again, outside the blunders, with that one, the McKinn contract, the Carter extension stinks. I'll never understand why he did that. And, again, I will say this for everyone one more time. Do not take Ron Hextall at face value when he's just going to pump up the forward group. He has to do that. He is not going to come out here and say, oh, yeah, Jeff Carter stinks. Oh, yeah, Brock McGinn stinks. Oh, yeah, Josh Archibald's terrible. I mean, he's not going to say it. He's going to pump them up. He's going to hide what he's really doing. Again, from what I've been told, one of the scoops I had on my Monday episode, they want a winger to play with Evgeni Malkin, and they're seeking one via trade. That would sign Jason Zucker down the lineup. That would make the team a bit deeper. They could potentially still have, another forward to come in via free agency if they have the space for it, maybe like a Dan Heine or something like that. I don't know, but that's one of the scoops that I have been told by someone who is close to the team and someone who has never failed me in the past. So a little bit of an incomplete grade, but overall, I think a solid B for this offseason so far. This is still squarely a playoff team right now. I mean, I think overall that they would probably make them. Say they did go into the season with this bottom six, and I don't think they will. They probably will still be in playoff position by the trade deadline anyway, because Sid and Gino and Letang, they'll probably just get them there anyway. I think Tristan Jarry, he's probably going to have a good regular season again too. And then they could also just, trade for a winger too. Go like to be like the Rangers from this past year, right? When they got Kopp and Vetrano and Tyler Mott and all those guys. So, I wouldn't be, I guess I would be a little surprised if they came into the season with this bottom six, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did make at least another move at the trade deadline for a forward if they haven't really made like a big one for their bottom six by then. So that wraps up this segment for today's episode. Coming up in the final segment, we're going to get to some silly season talk regarding Matthew Tkachuk, because it looks like that might be the next domino to fall. So that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So I'm going to put this out here right now. And if I get ratioed for it, if I get old takes exposed, whatever. No, Penguins are not trading for Matthew Tkachuk. Put the stamp on it. It is not going to happen. Heck, you can even save this to your phone or something if you want to. And if it somehow does happen, you can just put it in the comments. You put a link on it or something like that. But I don't see it. It would be a lot of fun to get someone like Matthew Tkachuk, because he's, I think, the exact kind of player that this team needs. Someone, an elite play driver, elite goal scorer in this league, someone who can get in your face about anything, just someone who's physical, just gives his 100% effort every single shift. And, wouldn't it be fun if he were just, going out with some of the the fan base's biggest rivals like Tom Wilson or something like that? Seeing him jaw him would be a sight for sore eyes. Or basically, Brad Marchand, even, that would be hilarious too. But I just, the Penguins, they don't have the package that Calgary would want. I saw this today. I was DMing my buddy about this. Eric Francis was saying, that the Flames are looking for a young cornerstone building player. The Penguins really don't have that. My buddy was telling me that Ty Smith could be that player, but I'm like, the Penguins are not going to trade Ty Smith for Matthew Tkachuk. They just acquired him, and I don't think he's a pure cornerstone player like a Jordan Kyrou right now. I mean, he's already, I think, one of the really good young players in this league. And the Penguins, they also just don't have the salary cap space to get to Tkachuk. They would only have that if they just unloaded a bunch of contracts. But I think the Flames, they're going to be interested in, a couple of your top prospects, at least a first round pick, and probably, again, a decent roster player like Jordan Kyrou going back. And I don't think the Penguins, would be wanting to pay that Again, it would make all the sense in the world. You can put him, he could probably put him on Evgeni Malkin's wing and ride him with Raquel and, have Gensel, Crosby, Rust, and probably have the most dangerous top six imaginable. And, maybe Jason Zucker is still on your third line if he's not being sent back the other way. But, I'm just fantasizing about that right now. And it's definitely fun to think about with how hard the Penguins will be to play against and just how crazy, that top six would be. But again, I don't see it happening. I know it's silly season. If I were to come up with, I guess, a trade proposal, if people would want that from me, first round pick. I was going to say Owen Pickering, but like they just drafted him and they're not going to do that. I mean, your first rounder, I guess one of the goalie prospects, it's hard for me to come up with one because the Penguins, again, they just don't have what the Flames would want. I mean, Penguins, they're not going to trade Brian Rust. They just signed him. They're not going to trade Jake Gensel for Tkachuk. They're not. Jason Zucker, he could go. That would help the cap situation, but he's not going to be the main centerpiece of the deal. I think he would just be in there for money purposes. But that's just the Penguins. I just don't think they would be a good match for him. Now, if they actually had a decent farm system with some decently top prospects, I would be all for it. And I think the Penguins, they should still make the call. I think every NHL team out there is doing it wrong if they're not at least inquiring about what the asking price is for Tkachuk. And, the Flames, it sounds like they definitely want to start over or something like that. I feel bad for their fan base because, those are basically two of the best players to have come through that franchise since Jerome McGinley was there. Mika Kiprusov, obviously a great goaltender back in the day. But, it looks like the potential dark days are coming for Calgary. It's not looking good. But, yes, it would be fun for the Penguins. Yes, he would probably score 30 to 35 goals. He would get in everyone's face. People would hate the Penguins even more. But I don't see it at this time. I mean, the fact that I can barely even come up with like a decent return for the Flames when you look at the Penguins roster and their prospects and picks and all that, I think goes to show that, I just don't think the Penguins, A, their salary cap situation probably won't work. And B, they don't have what it takes, I think, to get this player. So, we'll see if that happens, but, that has the potential to really send a shockwave through the NHL circles. But that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Let me know what you all thought about it. Leave a comment on the YouTube page. You can message me on social media. You can leave a review on the Apple page. Would love if you all would give me 5 stars. If not, I do get it. But I can only hope for you all to give me 5 stars. But, that'll do it for another episode for this podcast. I believe this is the 528th episode for the show. It's crazy how fast this is flying by. I will have another episode on Wednesday. Again, final full week of daily episodes before I go back to 3 shows a week starting next Monday. So thank you all so much for listening. Again, leave a like, especially on the YouTube page. If you liked it, leave a comment also with your thoughts on anything I talked about. And if you're not on the YouTube page, go subscribe to it as we get to close to 1K. And B, again, you can message me on social media. So again, I will talk to you all on Wednesday. Have a great night.